Hello and welcome to the Process Group Pentagon Challenge. Today, we're going to be taking a look still into the Pentagon, and I'm going to be giving you some ideas of how to link these process groups, how they interrelate. Let's take a look. Taking a look at the Pentagon here, we have the 5 process groups, and we are going to start off with initiating. Now that we've defined what each one is, your next challenge is to relate them to each other. And one of the ways you can do this is by using arrows. So as you take a look at your piece of paper where you have all of this, I would like you to tell me, how does initiating relate to planning? And then I want you to tell me, how does planning relate to executing? How does executing relate to monitoring and controlling? How does monitoring and controlling relate to closing? And how does closing relate to initiating? All right, so I want you to try that yourself, and then I'm going to tell you what I think you should have come up with. All right, so hit the pause button, think about it, and then let's move on. All right, so initiating is where the project is authorized. So as you go through this challenge, I want you to make some notes, okay? So we have authorization. This is where the project is authorized. Jotting down notes like this is only going to help you better solidify your understanding of this. So the project is authorized here. The relationship is you now have the authority to do all of the other process groups. So from here, you have a project charter. The project charter becomes an input to planning. A lot of the processes in planning use the project charter. So I'm just going to put this here. So the project charter is the main thing to think of. The project is authorized as a charter that explains at a high level what the goal is, what the target is, what the success criteria is. And based on the charter, you can begin planning all manner of plans: schedule, scope, cost, quality, resources, communications, risk, procurement, stakeholder, all of that stuff, everything. So what you're going to get going into executing is your project management plan. Your project management plan is the macro thing you get out. So what we're doing here, we're thinking macro, all right? This is how you need to think, macro, okay? So you get this macro output. It goes into executing as a whole. And then in executing, you're going to use that project management plan to drive the work being done. As you are doing that, you're going to get an output, which we know to be work performance data. You're also going to get what we call deliverables. In other words, you're executing, you're carrying out the work. So let's put some notes here. What you're doing in this one is you're planning. What you're doing in this one, we can say you're doing the work, okay? And as you're doing the work, you're making these raw observations. We call it work performance data. That is one of the things you're going to get from here, from the executing process group as a whole. Specifically, we get this from a process known as direct and managed project work from executing. But I want you to think about it like this: 2 big things to keep your eye on: work performance data, and the second one is deliverables, okay? Those 2 things will go into monitoring and controlling. In monitoring and controlling, we will take that work performance data and then we're going to analyze it. We're going to analyze it and then we are going to share it. So this is what happens. Right here in monitoring and controlling, you get an output, and I'll show you this as a loop back into itself. So from monitoring and controlling, we're going to get an output. That output is going to go back into processes within monitoring and controlling. And it is known as work performance report. So I'm just going to put that here. Actually, let me do it differently. Let me show you work performance information is actually what you will get out of monitoring and controlling when you analyze work performance data. So let's talk about that for a quick second. This work performance data, this is raw observations, right? These raw observations need to be analyzed here. Now you're going to analyze them in monitoring and controlling, and as a result of you analyzing your raw observations, which could be how much percent complete are we? That's a raw observation. Why are you only 30% done? The answer may need some analysis. You get what I'm saying? So that work performance data is going to be analyzed in monitoring and controlling. From that, we're going to get work performance information that goes back into another process in monitoring and controlling. And then as an output, we're going to get work performance report. So you could think of it like this. Work performance data goes into monitoring and controlling. Work performance information comes out from places in monitoring and controlling. Within monitoring and controlling, this work performance information that is processed work performance data, it tells us stuff. It gives us sensible conclusions and understandings about the project progress. And from there, we get something known as work performance reports. You're going to learn a lot more about this if you go to the right boot camp. You'll hear this being spoken about. But it's definitely worth knowing at this high level. All right, so we get work performance reports. The work performance reports, like I said, they come out of monitoring and controlling. We send them to a number of places, not only executing. We also send those work performance reports to places in monitoring and controlling as well. Okay, so there are actually 4 specific places we send work performance reports to. We send them to perform integrated change control. So you're going to have something that looks like this, just as a reminder, okay? The work performance reports go to perform integrated change control. They also go to monitor risk. They also go to perform integrated change control, which is in monitoring and controlling as well. They go to manage team. They go to manage communications. So it's pretty much those two, all right? So when I say WPR, I really mean work performance report as well, okay? So this is going pretty deep. If you're new to this, just stay with me. You're going to have to listen to this a few times, probably hear it and read it, and then it's going to stick a lot better. All right. But the bottom line is work performance data is your raw observations. We use this to generate work performance information, which is analyzed work performance data. This work performance information then gets put into a work performance report so that we can share the status of the project and other important details with stakeholders. All right. So from the monitoring and controlling process group, finally, we get something that we're going to call an accepted deliverable. Now, this is all high level stuff. We could go into a lot more. But the bottom line is in this process group called monitoring and controlling. From there, what we do is we inspect our deliverable. We inspect it as the performing organization, and the customer also inspects it. That accepted deliverable, it is then going to go to the closing process group. And it goes there so that we can transition that deliverable into the operations team, to the customer, whoever needs it. So that's the overarching idea of what happens. Finally, the interrelationship between closing and initiating. You need to think about it like this. On certain projects, we have iterations, and these phases are carried out over and over and over again. So in such instances, you could look at closing out a phase as being a gateway to the next phase. One of the things that happens in closing out a phase is kill points, milestones, phase end reviews. And we could also have something we call organizational process assets update. So let me do this again. Phase end reviews, organizational process assets updates. In other words, we could have a lessons learned repository being populated with whatever we have found as our lessons learned. So a lot of stuff there. I'll make it a little bit smaller. But when you think about closing out the project or the phase, you also want to think about closed procurements. In other words, things that you have to close out. All right, so you get the idea. Let's go ahead and show that. So when you're closing out a phase, this may lead to the next phase, and you have a cycle continuing. But there are some instances where instead of this leading to the next phase, this becomes a terminal point in which you transition out of the project, and this gets put into organizational process assets, and as needed, this gets used in the future. But we have a terminal situation here where this is the total end of the project. There's no next phase, no milestones or kill points other than the milestone of achieving the project success at the end. All right. So this is a very simple concept, but I want you to use this vehicle to stretch your understanding of project management. Okay. So now you've got a general idea of how this framework is and how things interrelate. But it's really that simple. Authorize the project, create a plan, start the work. As you're doing the work, you're checking the work in monitoring and controlling. You're performing the work, getting the work done, and therefore your deliverables get checked. When the stamp of approval is done, you get an accepted deliverable, and that is transition to the customer in close, project, or phase. So one final thing that we're going to put here is the final deliverable transition. It's that simple. Okay. Now, for those who have read the guide, and I'm talking about not the new one, but I'm talking about the old, right? Those who have read the old one, just remember that the process groups have not gone away. They're actually in the new one, but in Standards Plus, we have even more coverage of the process groups. And for that reason, what I'm showing you is still super, 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 super relevant, okay? So let's go back to a framework here. And one more thing we're going to be doing is taking a look at different variations of this framework. And we're going to be populating it with knowledge areas, and we're going to be looking at it from different angles, okay? But I want you to, for now, get those interrelationships right. And once you get that down, we move to the next stage. In the new edition, the 7th edition, what happens here is at a very high level. We talk about the process groups just one time in one tiny little page, but we need to blow it out so that you understand how to hang the principles, where to hang the principles. So this stuff hasn't gone away. It's still there. We just need to flesh it out more. All right. I hope you enjoy this. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.